This is Jonathan Yates with Wine Channel TV. Welcome to another episode of the Bipartisan Appeal of Wine, this time from Thanksgiving Farm Winery in Harwood, Maryland, with senators from both parties of the state of Maryland. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about their district. Senator, since this is in your district, why don't you tell us about yourself and the district?
Sure. My name is Senator Sarah Elfreth. I am proud to represent District 30, that's Annapolis and South County, Anne Arundel County. I am 97 days on the job, just about, and enjoying every moment of it, including this.
Senator Reilly.
So my name is Ed Reilly. I used to represent this area, but you know how gerrymandering is. But so I represent central Anne Arundel County. For those of you who know the state of Maryland and Anne Arundel County, I start at the Bay Bridge. I go to the Patuxent River at the Prince George's County side. I start at Spalding High School in the north and come to Southern High School in the south. It's a very high income, high education, and high maintenance district.
And it's perfect wine country.
It is.
So back in 2004, then Governor Bob Ehrlich had a study done of how to develop your own winery. What do you think the role is of the government in winery? Do you think that we should be out there telling people how to do it? I mean, this is not exactly a Sputnik incident.
Well, the issue is that Maryland has been operating for 50 years with post-prohibition laws. And to change the alcohol laws in the state of Maryland, we've been called a incremental legislature, which means the laws change slowly over periods of time. So when I came into office in 2002, farmers who grew grapes could not process them, could not bottle them, and could not sell them. They were basically a producing farm. And with our local Anne Arundel County legislation and county code, we tore down those artificial government obstacles so that we can have a full integrated process right here on farms like this.
So, Senator, you've only been in office for 3 months, but you had quite the impressive legislative record, sending 7 of 8 bills into law, which is incredible. So what have you seen with the wine industry and overall that you think needs to be done?
Well, Senator Reilly and I actually worked on a bill. It indirectly impacts the wine industry. We worked on a bill to make it a little bit easier for small local farms to host events at their previously existing structures. So if they have older barns, as long as they meet fire code and the county council approves, just to make it a little bit easier. I think our job is to not stand in the way of the business and to help farms or wineries or breweries kind of diversify their revenue so they can be most impactful in our economy.
So, Senator, have there been any times where you've had to step in and help a local winery?
On several occasions. The interesting thing is some of these ancillary buildings, when they were under the county code, the previous county code, they would have to make a full traffic study, a full environmental impact study for the area. They'd have to meet sprinklers and all kinds of fire codes for a storage building. And again, the county council stood up with local legislation to recognize that farm buildings are farm buildings. They're not dormitories, they're not restaurants. So we, again, tore down artificial obstacles so that farmers and vineyards can put up the appropriate support buildings. Now, I have to share with you, when I came into office 17 years ago, there were 13 wineries in Maryland. This year, 113.
Yes.
So we've come a long way in this past 17 years.
So let me ask you, recently they had a listing of the 100 top wineries in America to visit. Several from Maryland were on that list. Did you ever think you'd see that day?
I knew I would, because for that 50-year period leading up to current times, it was a passing occupation. There was only 2 or 3, Bordy out of Baltimore County and Sebastiani and a couple others who made a serious attempt. What we have now are farm owners and vineyard owners with high education and high interest in the science of winemaking. So our product has improved along with the effort and attention to detail which is needed to make good grapes.
So, Senator, have you seen the winemaking industry in Maryland become more professional too?
Absolutely, and I think we've also seen it with the breweries. We passed a number of bills this year to make it a little bit easier for breweries to flourish as well. And frankly, if I could switch topics a little bit, we've seen the same thing with oysters. And we've seen aquaculture just bloom over the last 2 decades. So we're seeing a professionalization and a nuance and a science to these commodities that is really exciting and certainly boosting our economy.
Now, Jonathan, there's a reason that this is occurring. I have to share with you that Maryland for 200 years was tobacco growing area.
It's Tobacco Road.
Tobacco Road. Due to a precedent-setting lawsuit against the tobacco companies, we were given a significant amount of money for farmers to divert away from tobacco into other crops. Well, field crops like corn and soybean, you need lots of acreage.
Sure.
Because of tobacco, a lot of these farms had been segmented into small 20, 30, 40 acre farms. You didn't have the 200 or 300 acre spreads like the Midwest, or 1,000 acres. So we tried to find products that fit the size of the farms, and wineries, vineyards is a perfect match for this size of a piece of property.
Now, people don't like to hear it, but as I always say, if you can grow tobacco and grow corn, you can grow wine. And the Maryland tobacco country is a perfect example of that. I'm glad you brought up craft beers. I'm not much of a beer fan. I think one time I did have a Sam Adams Light at an Orioles game to show how long ago it was. I think the Orioles won and Chris Davis hit a home run. But what's happening with the
hit something.
Yeah, that's to show you how long ago. What's happening with the Maryland craft brewery industry?
Well, I think it's flourishing. Probably it's a few steps behind the winery industry here in Maryland, but we also had some pretty antiquated laws when it came to distribution that this year I think we broke down a little bit to make it, again, just get government out of the way of these small businesses when it's necessary and when it's burdensome, and I think we accomplished that.
Yeah.
It took a couple years, like all good bills and all good legislation takes, but I think we made great strides this year.
The interesting thing on the brewery side is the major manufacturers of beer have an inordinate influence on our legislature. They're very resistant for the small breweries to come in. We've incrementally increased the amount of total gallonage the breweries are allowed to produce, because if they get too big, they're going to be more of a competitor against the big boys. So we're slowly making progress, and again, the number of breweries in the state has increased exponentially. And we're just glad that we're again breaking down the artificial barriers within government.
So speaking of government, let's look at Anne Arundel County. We're in the heart of what's called the land of pleasant living. Our present county executive has a winery background. Our previous county executive's wife worked at a winery. Do you think that there's a blooming future, if you will, for the winery industry now with those county executives in charge?
I never thought of it that way, but I think Anne Arundel County is on the verge of doing some really great things and diversifying our economy in a way that we haven't seen in a while. We have so many folks here who work for the federal government. We obviously have Fort Meade. We have some really great anchor institutions at the basis of our economy. But this is one of those ways that, again, it's about diversifying that economy, and certainly...
What do you think makes the land of pleasant living such an appealing place to live?
Oh, I mean, you can look around you and see.
Well, the senator lives 3 blocks from the water.
I do. And
in the capital city.
As do I. She's a neighbor, so.
Yes, and I get to walk to work every day. It's just an incredible place to live. Maryland is America in miniature. We have the mountains, we have the ocean, we have everything in between. Ed and I, Senator Reilly and I, are both from New Jersey, and we both agreed that we had wonderful upbringings there, but we both are transplants to Maryland, and if that doesn't say enough about what a land of pleasant living this is, then I don't know what.
Senator, what do you think makes the land of pleasant living so appealing?
People have come here for a very specific purpose, especially the Eastern Shore, Southern Maryland, Western Maryland. They've moved because of the attitude, they've moved because of the opportunity, and it attracts good people. And once they've come, for instance, we have very large employment bases, NSA, Northrop Grumman, the harbor. Once people have come to this area, they like it so much they want to stay.
So let's talk the 4 major wine areas in Maryland. We've got the Piedmont Plateau, where basically we're sitting right now. We have the Eastern Shore, we have Southern Maryland, and we have Western Maryland. What do you think of the Western Maryland industry? What do you think makes that appealing to someone who wants to hit the wine trail out there?
Just the variety. There's a lot. Down here in Anne Arundel County, we have 600,000 people. We have 3 wineries. You go to a small, less dense, less heavily populated county, they might have 10 or 12 wineries. So again, an opportunity for folks to go into a more rural area and have really good choices of wine to sample. Same thing on Eastern Shore. Not a lot of folks over there, but there's enough wineries to create a trail You travel a little bit, you eat a little bit, you sample a little bit. It's just a very pleasant way to spend a day.
So your district's sort of the heartland of Southern Maryland too. So what do you think makes the Southern Maryland wine industry so appealing for a tourist on a day trip?
Well, I think the appeal of Maryland is that we do have these vineyards, we have this beautiful countryside, but in Western Maryland you could also spend the day in Frederick City and appreciate the history there. On the Eastern Shore you have Easton, in Southern Maryland you have St. Mary's County, so you can spend the day at a winery and then go have a beautiful dinner in a historic small town and really feel the charm of Maryland really anywhere you go, which is incredible.
So speaking of a small historic town, what do you think of, Annapolis has, Dry 85, one of the best cocktail bars in America by Listen, and then you've also got, Red Wine, one of the best wine bars, and several other places. What's it like representing such a small city that's got such a strong wine and cocktail industry there?
It's expensive.
There are lobbyists,
I'm sorry, are you talking about the per price, per drink, or the total experience?
I am blessed to represent a district that has so many thriving small businesses and a diversity of small businesses. Both Dry 85 and Red Wine were so popular they built second locations in Ocean City, Maryland, and have just a wide-ranging appeal. So
it's sort of the Five Guy burgers of wine and cocktails are moving that way.
Right, but it's also accessible, and I think a lot of it's about, you have wonderful staff who are happy to explain the nuances of different cocktails and wines to you as well, which is part of the reason I love both of those establishments so much.
And don't forget Fox's Den.
Fox's Den is also wonderful.
Which is a real unique place underneath.
Yes.
Senator, you took a trip out to Woodinville, Washington a couple years ago, and a bill resulted as that. Why don't you tell us what that was all about?
So I recognize that because the wineries are located in such rural areas, it'd be a great idea to have a neighborhood identified as a wine tasting center. It was suggested that I go out to Woodinville outside of Seattle. They have over 100 tasting rooms in one little town. And the variety of the product, the variety of the setting.
What impressed you the most? I mean, you have massive ones like Chateau Ste. Michelle,
right,
which is close by. I mean, they produce 2 million cases of Riesling a year, more than anyone in the world. And then you have little small, intimate ones operating basically out of a storage shed.
Sure. The variety, and everybody had their personal fingerprints on their own site or their own wine, their own vintage. The variety is really attractive. And the other issue is now bachelorette parties go there. Bachelor parties goes there. Anniversary parties go there. They've popped up restaurants, hotels, limousine services, flower services, tuxedos, dresses. It's created an economic hub. So the thought I had was enabling the local counties to identify an economically viable location within their county where they can identify it, zone it properly, control the alcohol issues, over-serving and things of that nature, underage serving, and again, create a synergy, create a velocity of business, they say. Mm-hmm. And I found that this is a great idea for a place like Crofton, Maryland, where we have a small shopping area called the Village Green. It's a sleepy little underutilized area in Crofton. If we put 5 or 6 tasting rooms in there, the whole sense of the neighborhood would change, which is a problem because you don't necessarily want, the neighbors don't necessarily want a lot of traffic, a lot of alcohol, but yet the economic benefit and the tasting rooms you taste. It's not a bar. You don't stay there for 4 or 5 hours at a time.
No.
It's not a reception hall. You go, you sample, you buy, and you leave. So I find it an attractive model. My bill several years ago didn't go anywhere, but it's not a dead issue yet. I'd like to revisit it.
And so what are the economic multiplier aspects of having a nice winery or a nice tasting room or dare to dream even a Woodinville in your district?
Again, jobs, property taxes, values. In my opinion, the values would go up for the neighborhood, and it could utilize underutilized space. Take those sleepy little, where 50% vacancies, bring them alive. Because again, if you have 6 tasting rooms, you can do the candy shop, you can do the flower shop, you can do the gourmet meat shops. You can bring a lot of options to an area and really bring it alive.
Senator, what epiphanies have you had about the wine industry that you didn't recognize before you came to office?
Well, I worked a little bit in economic development before I was elected to the Senate, and what I love about serving in the General Assembly is, number one, we get to solve problems on a daily basis, and number two, it's a creative process. So just listening to Senator Reilly speak about, it's really about creating an ecosystem. And if there's one or two small things that government can do to kind of bring those barriers down or to support small businesses, it's going to have that multiplier effect. It's going to create an ecosystem that's greater than just a tasting room. And, I think about Asheville and the tourism attraction of Asheville and all the different breweries, and we can certainly do that. It's about lifting our economy up in a pretty cool and different and 21st century way.
And Jonathan, I've spent a few visits in the past few years down to Charlottesville, and they've developed that reputation. So people are willing to travel from our neighborhood 2.5 miles to go down for a day trip and visit the King Winery or Star Hill Brewery or some of these other places.
Is a very nice winery.
Yeah. So if you developed a reputation and you offer good products, people will come.
So let me ask you a question, Senator. Theoretically, the Maryland General Assembly is supposed to be a part-time legislature.
Yes.
Have you found that to be the truth?
Well, the good senator knows how difficult my district was to win. I'm in one of the most purple districts in the state, which I love. It frankly makes me a better senator. But I actually did campaign full-time, and I've been a senator for the last 97 days full-time, and I love it. We're going to see what happens next, but in the meantime, me and my staff are in the office every day continuing to solve problems for the district.
So, Senator, in your experience, have you found it to be a part-time legislature or a full-time job?
Well, it depends on the person. I have to share with you, there are senators and delegates who go January 8th, get out April 9th, and that's the extent of their engagement with the policy making and the legislative process. Those who care about their constituents and about their neighborhoods find time to be in their neighborhoods. So I was at 4 events today. I've got 3 tomorrow. I enjoy it. I like people.
I mean, crazy as it sounds, you were working when you were at Woodinville, Washington, going from winery to winery.
In a sense, researching public policy issues in a very pleasant way.
It's a very fruitful way, I might add.
Oh, fruitful.
And you're doing the same thing here, too.
Absolutely.
So after your 97 days, what do you enjoy most about being a senator?
I'm enjoying the kind of soft things that we get to do, things that don't take legislation, but we can still have an influence on. So representing the capital city, there's no end to the challenges that come up, large and small. I got a phone call today about fixing some parking spaces around State Circle. So
what do you mean when you say soft issues?
Well, things that don't require legislation, don't require a bill, don't require my legislative footprint, but the fact that we can pick up the phone, and so much of this is about building relationships, and that's why I'm so thrilled that Senator Reilly and I have developed a cross-generational, cross-party
She's young enough to be my daughter, so.
Senator, after your years in office, what's your most enjoyable part of the job?
So I'm a Republican in a Democratic state.
Yes.
I will never get cutting-edge legislation passed, and I know that. I've been a senator 10 years. But when people come to me with issues about state bureaucracy, with the backlog on getting things processed, and we can move their problem forward, I never try to influence an administrator's decision, but I want their decision to be prompt, fair, and clearly communicated. That's what I ask of my state and my county, and that's what I advocate for.
Now, last month was Maryland Wine Month. For the 3rd year in a row, they had that designated. When I interviewed a representative from the state of Washington on the show, he said what was wonderful was having such close contact with his industry, who gave him the heads up on legislation and how to improve it and stuff. Are you having close contact with the Maryland wine industry?
Absolutely. The
other than the glass in your hand.
So the executive director of the Maryland Wineries Association is a former professor at Loyola College up in Baltimore, and he's a published author on wines, Kevin Addix, and he does a great job in session and out of session to keep us informed of the issues. We talked a little bit about craft brewing. You got to understand that there's the biggest craft brewer in the world now in Baltimore County.
And who is that?
Guinness. Guinness has brought a production program.
Like I said, I'm not a craft brew kind of guy.
Guinness has brought a production group from Ireland to Halethorpe, Maryland. Halethorpe, Maryland is a whistle stop on Route 1 between Laurel and Baltimore City. And if 50 people went through Halethorpe, it was to get from one area to another.
They have a good bakery in Halethorpe.
Last year, 2018, they had over 200,000 people visit this brewery, which only produces one kind of beer.
Are we going to see anything like that in Anne Arundel County?
I don't know.
Senator?
Senator?
Or in your district?
I would love to explore distilleries. I think there's a whole,
Isn't Lure's Restaurant opening their own craft brewery?
I think that's out of my district,
Okay.
but I think we have some really great industrial parts of my district that would be perfect and ideal for a distillery or two, and it kind of adds to this almost tourism attraction of visiting Maryland for wine and craft beer and good whiskey. I mean, we stopped, you weren't there, but we did a freshman bus tour for the freshman legislators, and we stopped up in Baltimore City at the Under Armour Sagamore Distilleries, which was an incredible spot. Maryland was the home of rye whiskey manufacturing prior to the Prohibition. And I think we can be that way again, but it's so exciting to be on the cutting edge and seeing where we were 20 years ago with these industries and where we're going. So.
We've come a long way in about 20 years. The next 20 years should speed things up a little bit more.
And why have the past 20 years been accelerated so much? Because of the tobacco settlement forcing the farmers away from that crop? Or?
But it's a change in the legislature. People recognize wineries, breweries, distilleries create jobs, taxes, and again, that velocity of business, which is good for everyone.
So I'm guessing that Guinness was not the brewer of my Sam Adams Light that I had a few years ago at the O's game. But do they have any other plans for the state of Maryland, or are they just going to stay up in Haglethorpe?
Yeah, I think for now. The issue is, as I mentioned earlier in our interview, the legislature tends to be incremental. That was a really big step. It was a really big push. It happened in one legislative session.
And how did they pull that off? Was it the recent session?
No, it was 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago for the authorization, and then the implementation was maybe 18 months ago.
Did it require any public money?
No.
No.
No, it just required the major manufacturers of beer, the Buds, the Millers, the Coors, to step back a little bit and create a space for an iconic label.
And so do you see anything happening like that in the future?
I hope so. I think it's definitely I think our legislature is moving, but also our economy is moving. And I think folks of all generations enjoy not having a kind of big box option of wine or beer or whiskey or what have you.
We do have a Costco near Glen Burnie.
We do, but I think we're all enjoying the nuance and the craft of this kind of thing, and it's certainly very American of us to begin with. To build on that and grow, and it's exciting to be on this side of the legislature now. We get to not stand in the way anymore. We get to help.
You know, we have a very gracious host here who's let us film here today, so let's talk a bit about the character of people who own wineries. I do development work for a local charity, and we sent an email out to the wineries in Maryland and got over a 40% response rate for just one email, which is phenomenal. Generally, if direct mail, if you get a 1 to 5%, as politicians, you're frothing. Does that surprise you, knowing what you know of having dealing so closely with wine owners now, that they're so generous and so gracious and so working with the local community?
They don't have the advertising budgets to put anything on slick magazines or on television. This is a very effective way to get their product in front of large groups of people, 200, 300, 400 people at a time. You have a basket of Thanksgiving farm wine, and people are, where is that? How is it? And they ask the questions and they want to be engaged. And it's a low-cost brand awareness process. It doesn't surprise me at all, and I hope that people do participate, because it does make a difference.
Senator, does that surprise you to find out how generous the owners of wineries are?
Not at all. It's a little bit like a guerrilla marketing campaign. They have to do what they can, and they're a major part of our communities. And just like any small business supported the local baseball team's uniforms, I think they're ready and willing to support the local nonprofits that are doing great work. And if it helps their business, even better.
Have you dealt with many local winery owners?
I have not, but again, I'm a freshman legislator, so we'll see.
You have an intimate relation with Doden Winery.
I do. Stuart Pittman, our county executive, is a dear friend, and we've been to plenty campaign event at that winery. And they do wonderful events as
wonderful wine, as does Thanksgiving Farm.
Yeah.
Senator, when you were helping the owner of the winery with that, did you kind of detect that the romance of owning a winery might be leaving with him, having to deal with the government?
No. He's a very well balanced guy. It was fine. But I just wanted to share one other thing.
Certainly.
One of the reasons that the wineries are doing much better is they've adopted the estate attitude. In California, if you're in Napa Valley, you're buying grapes from all the growers in the area and you're putting it in and you're processing it and you're trying to blend. These are estate wines. The grapes are grown here, they're processed here, they're bottled here, and they're sold generally here. This provides quality and a uniqueness which is controlled by, as I said, very intelligent people who are interested in the craft of making
this
wine.
is a scientist.
I understand that. And so that allows a better product. We're not just throwing wine juice into a fermenting barrel and see how it comes out. This is a very deliberate process, and it's a great product.
It certainly is. Right now I'd say it's time to cork this episode of the Bipartisan Appeal of Wine. Before we say cheers, let's bring the owner out and thank them very much for their graciousness. We'll let Senator, your district, Senator Reilly.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thank you. Take off your sunglasses. This is Sarah.
Hi, nice to meet
Thank
you.
you so much for having us.
Thank you so
Hi,
much
John.
for having
Nice
us.
to see you again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us.
All right, now come here for a minute. So just a real quick, how long have you been doing this?
Oh, let's see. We started planting our vineyards in 1998.
So it's not a quick fix. It's a slow, methodical process.
Is the romance gone?
Not at all.
So thank you so much. So this is Cheers from
Cheers.
Wine Channel TV. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.